This is God.
It took years and several abandoned screenplays, but the two slasher monsters, Freddy and Jason, are finally back together on screen. What is the history behind this decade-old psycho-assassin rivalry? Could the potential crossover attract legal trouble? Stay tuned to find out all the important unanswered questions we need to be answered. Let's get straight into the video. First up, what is the history behind this decade-old psycho-assassin rivalry? The phrase, "my favorite horror movie icon could beat up your favorite horror movie icon," must be the modern-day equivalent of the ancient threat, "my dad could beat up your dad." It stands to reason that many might consider entering such a competition. How often must you witness these masked assassins slaughter masses of people before you begin to think, who could take them down in a duel? The intriguing possibilities raised by this question served as the inspiration for the 2003 film Freddy vs. Jason, which matched Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees, two horror icons, against one another. It would seem that a movie pitting these two cultural giants against one another would be such a money-making recipe that it would be approved right away. After the debut of Friday the 13th movie Jason Lives in the 1980s, the plot of Freddy vs. Jason begins. Tom McLoughlin, the screenwriter, recalled that a sequel was approved following the movie's successful performance. To legitimize this new episode's existence would require a strong hook. This is where the notion of Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger facing off first surfaced. McLoughlin was enthused about the idea of making this movie because of the popularity of classic horror movie showdowns like Frankenstein vs. the Wolfman, but he also saw a problem with this notion right away. Different studios were in charge of Freddy and Jason. Jason was working for Paramount Pictures at the time, and Freddy was the star of New Line. Next off, did these characters get a brief crossover without any legal wrangling? There was a very brief crossover between the two characters because they were now able to communicate without any legal dispute. Freddy Krueger makes an unexpected entrance at the end of Jason Goes to Hell, physically dragging Jason's iconic hockey mask down into hell, exactly 10 years before Freddy vs. Jason hit theaters. The movie ended with Freddy Krueger's recognizable gloved hand snatching Jason's mask and pulling it to hell, which seemed appropriate for a documentary about hell. The movie's conclusion seemed to imply that wherever Jason went next, Freddy would be there as well, and also maybe the Evil Dead mythology. But after 1993, the ongoing movie franchises, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, both took a break. There simply wasn't enough money coming in at the box office to finance future standalone horror films with these characters, or at least at the time. The sudden cancellation of these particular brands didn't make the Freddy vs. Jason movie any more quickly completed and available for viewing, even if there was still progress being made on it. Even still, there was still a ton of scripts for Freddy vs. Jason being submitted to New Line Cinema executives despite the suspension of standalone Jason and Freddy adventures. It's intriguing to reflect on the diverse range of ideas that were floated for this topic. Responses to the potential storylines for such a significant horror film range from, well, that's interesting, to cocaine is a hell of a drug. Next up, what does a slasher cinematic universe look like? Similar to Marvel, many slasher heroes and villains are portrayed by well-known actors. For many people, it's challenging to imagine anyone other than Robert Englund playing Freddy Krueger or Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode. Curtis recently played Laurie, and many veteran slasher performers might come back to reprise their roles. The crossovers could also be facilitated by rebooting the originals. Both directions seem plausible in the present time. These reboots may result in a crossover slasher franchise that incorporates the mythologies of several series, creating a potential for one more new episode each Halloween. A common slasher universe is a concept that has been floated around for decades without really taking off, much like the shared superhero universe. These venerable properties have had numerous sequels and extensions to their now rather epic plots, but they have not yet experienced a comprehensive crossover. In horror, as in comic books, it works well to combine various protagonists, go through numerous sequels, and develop rich mythology to work with and base stories on. The opportunity for horror to develop its own adventures is here. Next up, could the potential crossover attract legal trouble? It would take a month before McLoughlin received word that New Line Cinema would not permit this crossover to take place. The second attempt by McLoughlin to combine Jason and Cheech and Chong likewise failed. However, these problems would disappear once Jason Takes Manhattan's poor box office performance motivated Paramount Pictures to sell the Friday the 13th movie rights to New Line Cinema. The 1993 Wes Craven film New Nightmare was one of the solitary Freddy and Jason films that New Line Cinema decided to focus on, which was unfortunate for fans who wanted to see the two villains square off. The main obstacle to realizing this crossover had been overcome, however the project had since been shelved. Before the MCU even existed, the horror movies of the 1980s invented the crossover and may carry on the current franchise obsession on the big screen, so it's important to ensure that it's getting the production it deserves. Next off, what ideas were pitched for the movie that was later rejected? A courtroom drama where Jason is tried for his murders and Freddy Krueger finally gets involved was among the concepts suggested, as well as a potentially intriguing tale featuring a cult that worships Freddy and utilizes a resurrected Jason to bring him into the real world. A script with plenty of ambition was also written by Peter Briggs, who also wrote one of the early drafts of Alien vs. Predator. The Briggs screenplay includes time travel, a staple of low-budget slasher films, along with other bizarre plot twists such as a connection between Freddy and Jason's origins. To put it plainly, Freddy vs. Jason's creation was a tumultuous ride. Screenwriters Damian Shannon and Mark Swift were eventually called to present the potential Freddy vs. Jason crossover after New Line Cinema CEO Michael DeLuca had repeatedly rejected their screenplays over the years. While discussing the movie with Bloody Disgusting, the team remarked that DeLuca was quite excited about their proposal because it covered every aspect of the proposed feature in great detail. Finally, a firm and specific concept for a Freddy vs. Jason film emerged. Unfortunately, DeLuca would soon be fired from New Line Cinema, and Jason X's box office performance at the same time was disastrous. The new bosses at New Line Cinema needed to be persuaded once more that a movie based on the book Freddy vs. Jason was a good idea. Next up, was New Line Cinema able to persuade a studio for production? Fortunately, they were able to change the studio's mind, and Freddy vs. Jason was once again on track. The movie even managed to land Ronnie Yu as director and Robert Englund to return as Krueger. In terms of broad structure and story beats, Freddy vs. Jason's final version mirrors the team's original script for the movie. Shannon and Swift, meanwhile, have expressed dissatisfaction with the way David S. Goyer's final rewrite, which cut 30 minutes from the script, resulted in a ton of awkward expository speech to cover up newly generated plot holes. Nevertheless, after more than 10 years of production, the movie was finally taking shape. However, there were some intriguing kinks in the process of actually starting Freddy vs. Jason. To begin with, before directing Freddy vs. Jason, director Ronnie Yu publicly acknowledged in an interview that he had never seen any of the Elm Street or Friday movies. To make a good Freddy vs. Jason movie, you don't have to know everything about each particular franchise's backstory, but it was odd that this crossover event was being directed by someone who had never been involved with either storyline before. Even more upsetting was the fact that Ken Kirzinger, a new actor, took over the role of Jason in place of veteran actor Kane Hodder for the high-profile film. Next off, will the crossover survive despite the legal troubles? Freddy vs. Jason has a ton of additional issues that have prevented it from being as well-liked as one might think the ultimate clash between two horror icons would be, but it did make a ton of money during its initial theatrical release. It's also a marvel Freddy vs. Jason isn't more mangled in its final form, given how long this film was in development and how many writers it went through. There have been no rumors of a sequel or reboot since the film's debut, probably as a result of intricate right concerns involving both Jason and Freddy. If the two characters were to finally square off again on screen, it wouldn't be shocking, even though they might promise to include a cameo from Pinhead from Hellraiser this time. 1 year before it celebrates its significant 20th anniversary, the mashup fight movie Freddy vs. Jason has once again surfaced in the horror limelight. Are you excited about the long-awaited crossover? Which Freddy vs. Jason movie is your favorite? Make sure to let us know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching.